Hello and welcome to the Pandaverse. Today we have Mike Eberhardt, who's a narrator, and Seth Augenstein. And we have both of them together here at the same time. Seth wrote the book and Mike narrated the audiobook, and they're joining me and Christine Gabriel. So we're going to do a reading first, and then we're going to do an interview afterwards and just a general discussion about creating audiobooks. So if you're ready to go, Mike, we'll get underway.
Sure, that sounds great. No pressure. Let's start the whole thing off with a reading. Why not? So let me set the scene a little bit before we just jump in cold. So what has happened in the book up to this point, there has been a mass shooting, and like 60 or 70 people have been injured. There's like 40-something plus of them are dead. And so the doctors and trauma surgeons have spent the last 5 or 6 hours just triaging and rescuing and helping people. And so, stress is high. Nerves are high, everybody's exhausted, and we join our protagonist, Joe, who's one of the leader doctors here at the hospital, and he's checking on the rest of the surgeons like a good leader would. He mentions earlier in the day they were joking and laughing, and now there's no sounds coming from the break room, so he's going in to investigate to make sure that morale is good, that there's no impending danger, nothing bad is happening, and that's where we join him in the story. I went to the break room to check on the trauma surgeons. Earlier, I had heard the 4 trauma surgeons telling jokes, swapping stories, and comparing notes on the patients, occasionally cracking an energy stick. But now, all was quiet. I stepped inside and immediately saw why. The quartet sat at the same table, around the light from someone's Zapman, but they were rigid in their chairs, their heads all turned in the same direction, off into the shadows, where a dark figure stood at the sink, banging things. Something metal clattered on the ground. There was a man's voice cursing, and then there was a ripping sound. I approached the surgeon's table, put my hand on the shoulder of one Dr. Stuart Rothenberg, who leapt out of his chair at my touch. He grabbed my sleeve and pulled me down toward him. "My God, Barnes," Rothenberg whispered. "This man is a lunatic. A danger to everybody." "Who?" I asked. "Hi, the night shift man," whispered Paddy McDermott, the Irish-born Almachius trauma surgeon at the table. "The creepy jerk he is, walks in here without a word to anyone, goes over there, cuts the lights, and starts smashing and bashing things. The knacker." The 2 other surgeons, reinforcements from Clara Mass, nodded. "Did anyone ask him what he's doing?" I said. "Stewart said something to him about 20 minutes ago, but your man didn't answer. It's like he's in some kind of trance. The freaky jerk," McDermott said. "The man is a menace, an absolute nut," Rothenberg said. "I'll talk to the guy," I said, stepping toward the figure. "He's gonna have his hands full tonight." The silhouette came clearer into view as my eyes adjusted to the dark. The man was standing over the sink, scrubbing furiously at something. I saw the suds flying. I considered approaching and placing a hand on the man's shoulder, but decided better of it. Best not to startle someone who may be holding something sharp at the sink, I realized. Instead, I drifted to the other side of the counter, a row of switches near the appliances in the fridge. With a sweep of my hand, the lights for the whole room popped on. Calling stood there, soap dripping, squinting in the new brightness. In his hand was a soaking piece of fabric. "Hey, Chuck," I said in my most jovial voice. "What are you up to?" Calling stood, blinking. For a moment, he seemed stunned, like a wild animal caught in headlights. But he shook his head and rumpled the wet fabric. "Stains on my overalls. Figured I'd work on it a bit before my shift started," Culling said. "In the dark, you knacker?" McDermott called out. "Fluorescent paint. It's actually easier to see in the dark," Culling said, turning to face the darkened panel of surgeons. Then turning to the sink, he shrugged nonchalantly. "You bloody Mick bastard." "You bloody," McDermott shouted, rising from his chair. But the other surgeons leapt to restrain him, shouts erupting. Culling and I were the only ones who hadn't moved. "Why fluorescent paint?" I asked, raising my voice amid the scuffle. Calling put the white togs down on the rim of the sink and turned to face me.
What is this? 20 questions? My shift doesn't start for another 15 minutes.
Calling said. He placed his sponge next to the overalls and folded his arms on his chest.
What do you really want, doctor?
I scratched my head, taken aback by the nurse's hostility. Just wanted to prepare you for tonight, Chuck. Don't know if you heard about the massacre today.
I heard something. Innocent people dead, totally tragic, etc.
Without a change in expression, Calling turned back to the sink, picked up the sponge and fabric, and started scrubbing again. Something about his body language was off. After a moment's pause, I kept talking. It was even worse than February, what some people call the Bayonne bloodbath, I said. But you weren't here for that one.
No, I was not. But we got some of the spillover at my last place. Most of them, I ended up dying.
He scrubbed harder, grimacing downward at his garment.
Lots of sepsis. It was filthy. Disgusting, actually.
I nodded slowly. This should be a bit easier. Since we took care of most of the initial triage, you just have to keep them alive overnight. Calling stopped scrubbing and looked at me. His eyes were beady, black, glinting. I could see absolutely nothing in them, like they were those of a wild beast.
I'll do what I can. That's all I promise.
That's all any of us can promise.
Way to go. That was fantastic, Mike.
Thank you. It's so much fun. I love this book.
Oh, you could just read to me anytime you want. Anytime.
Excellent. One of these nights when you're bored, just give me a call. We're all locked down out here, so looking for something fun to do.
Yeah.
We forgot to say the title at the beginning. It's Project 137.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Everybody will see that. It's an interesting cover.
It's a great cover.
I remember when they were designing that cover. That was quite an ordeal finding the right photo to set the scene and everything.
Yeah, when I was asked to narrate the book and I saw the cover, I thought, oh man, I am in for it now. This is going to be some really scary, horror-filled, macabre situation. But
it has some darkness.
It's not nearly as dark as the cover makes it look.
That's perhaps. Yeah.
It's a great cover, though.
It really is.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a good bit of darkness in it.
There definitely is. Absolutely.
With the body count at the end. Yeah. Not to give too much away, but yeah. That's
The thing I love about your book, Seth, is that you have no idea while you're reading it and experiencing it who the villain really is. Like, who are the villains? I mean, there's maybe an obvious choice or two, but when you really look at it after going through it, it's pretty shocking. I remember, like I said, my process is weird. I don't read the book ahead of time. I go chapter to chapter, and I just remember being so surprised some of the times. And I remember there was a character I had a crush on, and I would email you going, I'm developing a crush on this character, and I'll never forget. You wrote back going, that's really nice. That's so fun. And then later I'm like, no, that character is like the big betrayer, and I couldn't believe it. I literally shouted out loud when I read that chapter, like, you can't do this to me. It was so funny.
I really was trying to like modulate, totally trying to keep back, but that process is so fascinating because it really comes through when you read it, that you bring that surprise and the twist like all in one fell swoop. So that was a pleasure doing that process with you last summer. So
it was so much fun. So much fun. Love this book.
Yeah, and you reading just now, I mean, it gives me chills, because it's like, I hear the voices like Patty, and it's like I lived in Ireland for a while, and you just nailed it. I mean, it's just magic.
Thank you. That's a huge compliment. Thank you. I learned all my Irish accents on YouTube.
It's amazing, stunning.
Really
Thank
cool.
You. So fun.
So Seth, how much historical background did you research for this story? I know it's the backstory on it took place in World War II, but the actual story takes place in the future, and then it kind of ventures back to what happened in the past.
Yeah. Well, I always say like the pat answer, how much research? It was like about 2 feet, a 2-foot stack of books, because I still read, physical books. So, and I mean, considering this is like, it's Unit 731 is really the historical backdrop. The first chapter takes place in what, 75 years ago this week, actually, 1945, August, in Manchuria. So no, I get these little obsessions. I was a history major. You start diving in and you find how deep the rabbit hole goes as you accumulate books beyond a foot, perhaps 2 feet of research. The thing that was really kind of shocking was, this most heinous of all crimes was never appropriately prosecuted. Like a lot of the other baddies of World War II, these people were just kind of given a pass. And so the more I found out about that, the more it became a pet obsession. And actually, I do have this, not on my nightstand anymore, but I would not read this book because this is hugely depressing. I mean, it's really harrowing stuff, and it's not like you can say, oh, this is fiction, don't worry about it. It's like, oh, this actually happened. But I would call your attention to the cover where it says, the American cover-up. And it was an American cover-up. And the other part of the historical research is what came of that. And this book was written by a warfare expert I covered as part of my newspaper career, Leonard Cole. It's terrific, terrific mind. Yeah, I mean, to summarize this book in a sentence is the US government experimented on its own citizens with airborne dispersal of germs. You start going down that rabbit hole, you go in some weird places, especially probably not always true places, but some of these books are really harrowing stuff to learn about. So that was part of my 2 feet of research right there.
So how did you tie the past and all your research in with the story that was evolving in your mind? How did that come together? Because the story's set in what, 2087 or something like that?
Yep, exactly right, 2087. Yeah, it came together like a Frankenstein monster, I would say. Originally, I was writing a book about, I didn't kind of even know where it was going. Another upbeat topic, New Jersey's most infamous serial killer, Charles Cullen. You may have just heard an appearance of in Mike's reading.
I studied him on your suggestion on YouTube. I watched interviews with him to feel out his vocal inflections and kind of just his general energy, and I tried to incorporate that into the Cullen in the book.
And I was so glad you nailed that, because yeah, I mean, he is like just this weaselly guy with like that Roman haircut, just like the
yes, so creepy.
Oh my, yeah. I mean, I was just like, I was a teenager when he was kind of like being outed for these things. I mean, really bad dude. They still don't know what he did. I'm kind of down the road here at some of these hospitals. So I was writing a book about him, and then I'm doing all this crazy ass conspiracy research about horrific history and everything. And I was kind of like, killer nurse, killer health conspiracy. It's kind of just started gelling. And then actually I couldn't get out of my mind this one newspaper story I wrote. It was the best thing I ever wrote for a newspaper. It was about a brain tumor doctor. And I got to see how the outcomes of some patients. And it was really, that was kind of a tragic story, but he was so inspiring that he kind of became my stand-in, like what kind of character, like a doctor, would kind of pierce this conspiracy veil. So those three elements kind of became a Frankenstein monster of a book known as Project 137.
So
it turned out to be a pretty awesome book. Congratulations.
Thanks. Took 8 years.
So you had a lot of challenges in structuring the story, but I mean, most of what you write is nonfiction journalism. I mean, your experience in the past. So what were the challenges shifting gears and starting to write fiction?
That's a great question. There's always, I think, a challenge in there if you're trying to do either one or the other, because I mean, you got to keep it so cut and dry when it comes to journalism or any kind of communications for mass.
Everything's written in an inverse pyramid style.
Yes. And it's extreme. It can be extremely formulaic. I would say even in my journalism, though, it came through that I was a fiction writer and reader from the word go. When I was doing my undergrad education in college, I was going to write the great American novel at age 22 and not have to have a normal job. It just happened that I think you could say that you get sidetracked into journalism. But
Yeah, life intervenes at
yeah,
some
that's-
point.
yeah,
Always.
and marriage and taxes and kids, and not in any particular order. But
And then 40 years later, when your hair's gray, you wake up and you go, maybe I'll write a book.
yeah, that's and what a book it is. So yeah, it was a challenge, sure. And actually, it was Pandamoon that like kind of helped me harness a lot of the character development and kind of squash some of those inclinations of keeping it too cut and dry in a journalistic sense. So that was the editing process that really kind of brought it back to the art instead of this, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. The kind of reportage that's not as creative.
So this book was actually rejected when it was first submitted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've heard pieces of that story in the past. I was kind of surprised by it because the book's really well written. But
I got the best editing advice ever from Sarah Kramer. I can say that bar none. So I mean, just to start at the beginning, because that's where we normally start. It was like a Twitter pitch. I think it was Pit Mad or I can't remember which one. She expressed an interest in this book. I got her the manuscript. A couple months later, she sent me like kind of a Dear John, like kind of form letter. And I was hopeful enough, and I thought the book was good enough and had a batshit crazy enough kind of concept that would make it stand out that I did just send her a note saying, hey, I know you're busy, like you get a million of these things, but like, could you just give me like a hint or a clue as to why you rejected it? And it was just a paragraph. It was like 3 or 4 sentences. She's like, normally I don't have time to do this, but you got a lot going on here. You can write. And she didn't kind of knock me gently saying like, it's too dry in like a journalism sense. I don't connect with the character enough. And it was literally a paragraph, again, 3 sentences. And she said, if you want to take a look at this, because it would be some kind of major surgery, you can bring it back to us. We don't often do this, but like, it was an original enough idea. It has promise. So I was like, thank you so much. I mean, really, just what she wrote, I knew it was correct immediately. So I dove back into the book immediately upon getting that email. And it was in third person. And I rewrote it entirely in the first person. And I rewrote it as if I say the brain tumor doctor, who is kind of the template for my main character. But I mean, it's as much me, of course. And it's as if I was living this and seeing this 2087 borderline dystopian world. And it was like, I mean, the editing advice clicked everything into place. I mean, it was a joy actually to rewrite. That sounds like almost insane to say that, right? Like a joy, a whole flipping book, but it was actually fun, and it sang after that. And actually, when I finished that process and I sent it back to Zara, I was actually pretty darn confident that she would make it up, just because it was like, now it sings. And my wife is like one of my cruelest, heartless editors. She's really good for me. I mean, she gives me the straight dope, and when she read what I had done, she's like, now this is so yeah, best editing advice I ever got in 90 seconds. So actually it was a much shorter email than what I just gave you, recounting how it went down. So
I can't believe you changed from third person to the entire thing being first person. I had no idea that you
yeah,
went
that's
through
hard.
that.
That's hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll say, after thinking about it that way, I noticed that with the Ashiti chapters, when they flash back, those are third person. And then when you're in the modern current times, it's first person. And I've never read another book that's fashioned that way. And I loved it. As a performer, it was so great to be able to do that.
oh, thanks. Yeah, it's definitely again, a Frankenstein monster of many edits. In fact, the backstory of the Shiroichi chapters, that was a book within a book that was written somewhere around year 4 of the development. It was my best friend from college who was like, I want to know about like the history. Like, why don't you, like, because it was all alluded to in kind of, cryptic ways. But he's like, why don't you actually just bring the people through some of the beginnings of the conspiracy. So that was another 6 months right there, writing a book within a book. It came together.
Anybody that's watching this, that's an aspiring writer, or you're working on a manuscript and you're thinking about submitting it. I mean, the golden rule in sales, and you're basically pitching a product to somebody to sell it. You're pitching it to the publisher. And one of the cardinal rules in sales is don't take no for an answer, but it's really the publisher's telling you not yet. It's not no, but it's not yet. There's something that needs to be finished here. There's something that needs to be further developed or fleshed out. And, you know, people can learn from that. You know, don't take rejection as an outright no.
Yeah.
You know, go back and look at the manuscript and see what can be improved, and then submit it again. And if it's rejected 40 times before you finally get a yes, then you know what? It's a better manuscript than you started with.
Right. Wasn't it Stephen King that had over 50 rejections for Carrie?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So don't give up.
I mean, every author out there has been rejected.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's one of those things, if you want it bad enough, you know, keep going, you'll succeed.
Truer words never spoken. Yeah.
And you continue to be rejected because every time somebody picks up your book or looks at the listing online and decides not to buy it, hey, it just got rejected again.
Never-ending process of rejection.
Yeah, don't feel bad. It goes that way in the narrator world too. I get rejected all the time. I'm doing book 14. I got rejected a week ago. You just never know. You know, it's so funny.
Yeah.
In making the audiobook, you guys kind of talked about that already. I know there was some back and forth going on. You know, Mike's asking you what the characters sound like, and you're answering with, "Gee, I don't know." So, I mean, I hear them in my head, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. How weird is that for you, Seth, to go through and have someone else create the voices and to vocalize your work? Because obviously, like what Elgon said, like, I'm sure nothing I did sounded like anything you had in your head.
Well, actually, I mean, partly to the contrary, you nailed a lot of the things that I was hearing, like especially Shiro Ishii, that gravelly Japanese accented voice. That was dead on. Patty, McDermott, the Wipeout. Why am I Marmalade?
Oh yeah, Marmalade. Oh my gosh, that guy.
To me, you made him sound like Matthew McConaughey from True Detective season 1, and it's like, yeah, that's pretty much like Burnout, Wipeout. So, but I mean, other things you kind of, I think when we were first talking, I was like, this is your work as much as mine. I mean, really, the audiobook is like, it's a separate work of art, but it stands alongside the initial book. So I wanted you to just bring some fresh stuff, because your ears are going to be probably better than mine when it comes to that kind of production. And it like every step of the way, you just highlighted things better than I was highlighting them. But I mean, it was like magic in as much as like you reaffirmed like the vocal cadences that I was like hearing, even if I didn't have like a direct accent that was in my mind, you kind of just still extrapolated on it and like kind of just made it livelier. So no, I mean, the whole process was an absolute pleasure. And yeah, we just compared notes. Actually, that like on a personal note too, that was like really nice at that time, because it was around this time last summer we were doing this. Maybe a little bit, it was more like July. But I mean, I had a really rough bankruptcy and unemployment kind of situation. My company went bankrupt and I was unemployed. So like, you know, I'd be walking the dog all over my little town, just trying to like, you know, kind of burn off some nervous energy as I'm sending out like 4,000 job applications. And no, I mean, just talking to you and listening to what was becoming of my book was, it was a nice light in a very stormy kind of time for me. So I think I mentioned that to you. But,
you did. I'm so glad that it was that way for you. For me, it was incredible, because my dream is to narrate and to do voiceovers. I'm doing that. But you were the first author that took the time to speak to me on the phone and to really collaborate. And I'll confess, in the beginning, I was like, oh, great. Is this guy going to micromanage me and hate everything I do and be like, oh, you need to do your S's this way and do that? You were such a pleasure to work with. Every time I would send, the great thing about it is I would finish a chapter or two and send him to Seth, and then he would listen, and then we get on the phone and we talk about it, what he heard, what the experience was. It was always positive. And it was like we got to live in the book together as I created it. And it really is one of the most fun projects I've ever done because of that. And you gave me the courage after working with you to think that, okay, I can call these authors and talk to them and collaborate. Because in my mind, you guys are all these big rock star people. I'm like, oh my God, you guys are the authors. And I'm so intimidated to talk to you. And so it was really nice. You're so approachable and such a joy to work with. And I just loved our collaboration. It remains one of my favorite projects I've ever done. It's been such a joy.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I'm glad you think we're all rock stars.
Yeah, you guys are the names on the cover. You create the world. I mean, I'm sure I voice them and bring them, bring them to life, and all that stuff. But I couldn't do anything without you guys. Like, it doesn't matter how many voices I do. If the writing is crap, the book's gonna suck, and my narration doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So what's next for you, Seth? You got a project on the burner right now?
Yeah. I'm finishing a novel that has 3 feet of research, 3 foot stack of paper.
It's a bigger stack.
Only 3 this time, huh?
So is this one going to take you 10 years to write?
No. I mean, I finished the draft. I started it, I think, right when Pandamoon and I were coming together on Project 137. I finished the draft in a year, but it was an I won't use the adjective that I want to use, but it was a mess. It's really shaping up now, but I'm obsessively going over every sentence because that's the kind of writer I am. I'm hoping to finish by the end of the year. It's a Western set in Mongolia. So I've
heard the title.
I have also.
Yeah. What's the title of this one?
Llama with a Gun.
That's awesome.
I love it.
That is a title worthy of one of my books.
Fried windows, light white sauce, llama with a gun. Psychedelia. This is like a llama with one L. It's like a Dalai Lama. But yeah, I mean, it's based on part of the reason the thing was so arduous to research this time around was it's based on a real character, a real historical figure who was very unknown outside Mongolia, but he was a Buddhist monk and he was also a warlord with lots of blood on his hands. And I mean, some of these books, there was like 1 copy in the entire state of New Jersey, and it was at Princeton University Library, and they wouldn't let it out of their walls. So, it was like tracking these things down was kind of interesting. But it's certainly an action story. I don't think it's, a lot of people said at Project 137, like, maybe not my cup of tea, but it's certainly not boring. This book is probably even less boring than.
So is there a higher body count in this book then?
Yeah, I stopped counting somewhere around page 80 or so. It's bonkers. But I mean, I had to learn like Buddhist mysticism again, like for the first time since like college, and all this ritual and stuff. So
yeah, when I lived in Asia, the Buddhists were really chill. I mean, it's kind of surprising that you would have somebody that's a violent Buddhist. It's almost an oxymoron.
And that's part of the challenge is like learning about these cultures, like Mongolia, as we all know, like Genghis Khan swept across the world, conquered everybody in his path, and then kind of Buddhism made some inroads in this country, and it's not like the cultural aspects that made them conquerors went away. They just kind of brought the Buddhism into it, and so yeah, it's I think it's going to be pretty interesting. So you guys,
it sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Zach, do you have any advice for your readers? Why don't you tell them, give them something Seth-like, that way they can go out into the world and, do something great.
Any advice, you said?
Yeah, give our readers some advice.
I mean, advice in as much as definitely writing. I mean, the only way to, well, it's like anything in life, I guess, generally. Like you have to do something so often and so consistently practice at it that's the only way to master anything. And I mean, certainly, was it Hemingway said, like, writers were all apprentices in a craft that nobody becomes a master at. But maybe that's the beautiful thing about it. We have to keep banging our head against the wall each and every project just to figure out what the heck we're doing.
And hopefully every project gets better than the last one. So.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But that would be my only advice.
I think that's great advice. Keep going. Keep pushing. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell me, is there a sequel coming up for this book, or is this a standalone one and done?
Oh yeah, I totally neglected to mention that. Project 137, yeah, I definitely have an idea for a trilogy. Yeah, no, this one's based on, of course, like I mentioned, blathering at length about Unit 731 and germ warfare, tinfoil hat programs, that kind of thing. The second one would be centered around Tuskegee medical experiments, which I think are, maybe a little more well-known. That was a lot of the syphilis non-treatment of African Americans in like Mississippi, Alabama. Really, really nasty history there too. And you see a common linking theme: horrible history, kind of to the year 2087, where the conspiracy needs to be cleaned up by good Dr. Joe Barnes. And then the third one would be more in like Oklahoma, and that would be the legacy of de facto biowarfare with Native Americans. I mean, because the reason the country is the way it is now is because of smallpox blankets and, whether it was witting or unwitting kind of genocide, it's part of our history. So yeah, that would be the kind of overall arc, without giving too much away. But the books are practically like written in my head. It's just, this crazy ass Mongolian thing got in the way. So,
sounds fun. I can't wait to read it.
Yeah.
So do you envision the Mongolian thing going out farther than one book, or is this a standalone?
I think it's a standalone, especially the way it ends, and kind of the. I did leave one little kind of loophole somewhere in the story. I'm being really cryptic here. This historical figure, because he's not that well known, there's a lot of years that are unaccounted for in his history, and somewhere around the year 1895 to 1905, there's not a lot known about what he did, and I kind of glossed over it. So that could be a sequel, technically, but no, I'm not gonna write that sequel. It's better left unwritten, I think. But it's a standalone.
We look forward to your new books, and I would highly recommend to everybody to get this book and read it. It's a fascinating book, and it's very enthralling. There's a lot of disturbing things in it, especially because a lot of it's based on stuff that really happened, in the past. So, and with what's going on in the world right now, kind of makes you wonder if some of this wasn't, like a designer virus that got out of control.
I think I texted Seth in either March or beginning of April, like, oh my God, I think I'm living inside of your book.
Yeah, that's the scary part, because you're reading and you're saying, yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah. If they ever ask if I want to put my iPhone inside my arm, I'm saying no.
Agreed.
I read a news story just the other day about implants, like the implant technology, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. People, read my book. Learn this is bad.
It's not a good thing.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
I used to think it sounded great, and then I read this book. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to sign up for that.
Yeah, I don't want people knowing where I am every hour of every day. Okay. I mean, I experienced that, working in retail, you're on call 24/7. If there's an alarm at the store, you got to respond to it. Christine knows this. I mean, she lives that too, but they would call you at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's like a bird that flew past a motion detector, because, I worked for Homeless Depot at the time, and we had pigeons that roosted in some areas of the store because the doors were constantly being open and the birds would fly in and they'd make a nest.
Oh man. I'm
Wow.
down arms.
So at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, and I'd say, well, I got to be there at 5 anyway, so I might as well
Start early.
start early. But,
Well, they can implant into your arm, and then you can track the pigeons that way more easy.
that would be good though if you catch the pigeons and put tracking devices on them, then you'd at least know, yeah, there's pigeons in the store. Yeah.
Good for pigeons, not for people.
Well, we thank you for taking the time to spend with us today. Again, everybody, the book's called Project 137. It's by Seth Augenstein. It's available on Amazon. It's also, I believe it's available through Ingram, so you can order it at bookstores. Yeah, it's a really good book.
And it's on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon as an audiobook.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and for having Mike as well. I mean, this is really fun. It's great to talk with you guys again.
Yeah, it's always fun having Mike around.
Oh, it's so fun to be here, you guys. I love spending the time, and it's fun to read and just all talk about it. It's just the best. It's great. Let's do it again soon.
Well, you're the best.
Aw,
Aw.
I'll drink to that. It's water. I need a better drink, you guys.
All right. Well, Seth's got iced tea. I'm drinking seltzer water.
I got
Ooh,
plain water.
Oh, good. We're all tame.
That's
It's
yes.
early.
All
We need to
right.
do this again later at night when we're all drinking other things and see what comes out.
Yeah, you don't want to get me drunk. I'll go off on some tangent, deep dive down into the well.
Hey, it sounds good. I'm in lockdown. I'm bored. Let's do it.